says waiting for, yeah, I don't know if you actually.
So we may want to stop and make sure we start over
Okay.
before we do an hour.
I hit the go live button. Hopefully it has the backlog. It says that there's 4 minutes and 50 something seconds. Okay. I hope it's live for everyone now.
Let's see.
Okay. Everyone says it works. They said it wasn't working until just about now. So, okay.
Yeah.
I think we're good now.
YouTube has this thing where you can hit the go live button, but when you schedule in advance, it just says all you need to do is go live by hitting stream in your software. So you hit stream and it automatically goes live, right? Well, for whatever reason, it needed me to hit the go live button. So, software and being inconsistent.
Anyways, so do we have to redo the intro?
Let me
chat.
check it quick. Yeah, I think we should check.
Anyone that has the stream pulled up, just see if there's the DVR function that kicked in and has the last 4 minutes of us talking.
Okay, wait, be quiet for a second, then I'll check. Okay, it started when you said wait. It says waiting. Let me check and make sure. When Alan said that, that's when it started. So we do have to start over. Yeah,
that's fine. All right. Well, welcome to Overvolted 24. We have Donnie, Alex, and Tom with Moore's Law is Dead is being a guest for us. We want to welcome him and thank him for carving out some of his day to come and join us. We've had a lot of cross-pollination between our channels, and so I know a lot of our fans are a fan of Tom's and vice versa. So we thought this would be a great, unique event for you guys and wanted to welcome him to our podcast today. So,
yeah, I mean, I've been a fan of the Adored channel since before I started my own channel, so it's, you guys invited me on and I thought, really, of course, I had to make sure there was a time that it would work, but it was, when you asked, it was always going to happen.
Yeah, we've been wanting to do this for quite some time and we finally got some time to do it. So, especially with the holidays and all that, just a lot of stuff has been going on the past few months. But glad to have you. Let's go ahead and I wanted to kind of get a feel for a few, I guess, more personal questions, things that you don't normally get in your day-to-day videos that you put out. First off, how did you get your start in YouTube?
So, I've always been, I had a gaming PC. Well, it was the family's PC. That was before everyone had their own PCs. It was the house PC. I gamed on that before I had any console. And I've always been into gaming. I had a decent gaming PC since, I don't know, probably 2000. Well, again, it depends which one you count, since the late 2000s. But I really got into it when I got a 7970 and built a new desktop because, and they've heard this a little bit already, but because we had to restart the stream. But, no, the story is I bring up the 7970 just because it's like, I had an above average overclocker for sure, but the average performance gain was 35% with my overclock. Like the memory was overclocked over 50% from stock, like over 1800 megahertz. And then the core was over 1200 megahertz. So, but usually the cores back then, 28 nanometer below 1000. So it gamed so well. I keep trying to explain to people when they kill themselves with instability for like a 5% performance boost. It's like, you guys got to understand. It's really not worth it much anymore. Yeah. When I used to overclock this, it would be like if you went from a 20. Yeah, it would be like if you went from a 1080 to a 1080 Ti. That's the performance boost I got. It was absolutely absurd. It was to the point where it was almost as good as an R9 290 when that came out.
Regularly, what a lot of people would do is they would buy the card below.
Sorry, that's my dog.
We would you would buy like the 680, the card below the top tier one, and you just overclock it to get to that performance.
Yeah, like the 670 especially was. There were some benchmarks where it was as strong as the 680, though, to be fair, because of how little disabled that one was.
Yep.
But I mean, yeah, and that's what I try to explain to people too, is like the level of performance you got back then. Look, performance keeps increasing. That's true. But at the time, a 680, a 7970 was strong enough to run anything at a high resolution and frame rate. And if you added 35% on top of that, that would be like if you had a 3090 right now, and then you overclock that by 35%. Like games were a joke to play on PC. And it's probably because that console generation dragged on so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
but
the hardware was just so underpowered by that point.
But yeah, I was into PC gaming for a while, and then I started arguing with people a lot in the WCCF Tech comments in like, I don't know, 2017, and onward. Maybe even 2016 and onward.
That's such a cesspool.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is, there were actually, I feel like especially back then, a higher percentage of the comments were more genuine for whatever. I could be wrong, but that is my opinion, that they have descended more and more into madness over the years. Like sometimes I check the WCCF Tech comments now, and it's just like, I'm not even going to say exactly what they're talking about. Sometimes they don't want us to get demonetized, but it's like, it's not even
about tech. It won't even be about tech. It's just,
like conspiracy theories towards groups of people half the time. And I don't know what happened, but there was a point where I thought it was pretty rewarding, but eventually, I'd like spend too much time putting together this argument, have links to what I was talking about. And then, the response would just be, you're an idiot or something. It'd be like, why'd I put all this effort into this? And eventually I just made a YouTube channel, and the first video never got released. Maybe if we cross a next Patreon goal, I'll release it to the patrons. It was terrible. It was the most terrible thing you'd ever see. I've released a small clip of it once just to give people an idea.
I'd regularly tell the people in the WCCF comment sections, because I used to write there.
Yeah.
When they'd argue and they'd use really poor grammar and use really poor logical arguments towards whatever it was I was talking about, to just go try to do their own thing. And I honestly think a lot of people who are really passionate and engaged in this, they should try doing this to understand at least the perspective of what it's like from the other side, to try to interpret this data, to try to benchmark stuff, review it, what have you. Because it seems a lot easier on one side until you have to do it. And a graphics card is really fun to review the first like 5 times you do it. And then after a while, you're just clicking buttons and you're just reading data,
Just go into autopilot.
Well, I'll take it a step further too. Because I've certainly seen, the amount of free time some of the haters must have never ceases to amaze me. I thought I wasted a lot of time in the comments, but there will be people who put together full book reports on why me or other tech tubers are lying evil people. And they'll just be like links like, well, he said this, but he must have really meant this. And it's like, and then you'll see in those comments under those Reddit posts, right? Like someone will go, oh, I know I should make a YouTube channel. And they never do. People who started out hating everyone, they never do, because half of the work, if we're being honest, is the work, right? I know. Now, if you take 3 days to make one Reddit post that's 3 paragraphs, good job if it doesn't have any errors. Try to put out a video every other day that doesn't have any errors, and then keep doing it even when you make mistakes, even when maybe something didn't turn out the way you wanted it to, because most of it's just the work ethic, if we're being honest.
There's a lot of consistency that needs to be there.
Yeah.
And there's also, like, I'll occasionally see somebody on Reddit, like, read a mouse review, and they'll critique like 3 things that the reviewer missed. And I'll go, well, you're a mouse guy. This guy probably does 12 other things.
Yeah. And, you often have a point, this was wrong, but hopefully you don't say it invalidates everything else, right?
Oh, yeah, no. And I absolutely appreciate the people who are very specialized and really into one specific thing. And they make they can sometimes give you great and fantastic feedback, but it's a little absurd to assume that, we're supposed to have engineer level understanding of everything.
Well, that's the funny thing too, is, I went to college for mechanical engineering, and even by now I forget things. Right? And it's like, even if you literally studied something, if you don't do it every day, you can just But I think we should probably move on, though, right?
Well,
Like, what else is on
I
the
just
script
wanted
here
to
besides?
key off of what you were talking about there, Tom. As reporters, as news media people, we don't necessarily have the benefit of using all of these things on a day-to-day basis, right? I mean, how many times do we get to pull up a Athlon CPU from yesteryear or a Xeon today? And I feel I kind of have a little bit more unique niche in the reporting, because reporting and doing this isn't my day job. I'm not doing this 24/7. I'm not doing this even 40 hours a week. My 40-hour a week job is as a system administrator in a data center. I manage virtual machines. I manage Windows Server. I do all of this stuff. And so I feel that I at least have a unique contribution of being boots on the ground and dealing with yesterday's, or should I say this month's Patch Tuesday, and all of the things that might happen in a large enterprise environment with that kind of a rollout. So we do have a little bit of uniqueness, at least for our setup. Where we can talk about some things, and I think we might actually get to that a little bit later in the podcast. But there's a reason why we got you on this time.
Away, by the way, don't mind me. Some people are saying my mic's louder than everyone else's.
Yeah, you do have a nice audio setup there. So
yeah.
So you mentioned you had an engineering college experience. What is your background, and what were you trying to become as a professional, Tom?
I mean, I actually come from a family of engineers, really. I think my uncle, my grandpa's a civil engineer. I have an aunt who's a chemical engineer, and then her brother, I believe, is like a materials engineer, or actually, yeah, like half of the people in my family have engineering degrees. We very logical people, annoying to be around sometimes. We really argue quite a lot because there's a reason everything's the way it is, right? Until we want something, then we're just gonna forget that for some reason sometimes. But
that's just how people work, man. That's just how
I know. But yeah, so I went to college for mechanical engineering and also international studies, because I've just always been really just fascinated with anything having to do with foreign cultures and history. And I mean, I actually got into mechanical engineering with the idea that I would design guns. I'll just say it. I know some people that surprise a lot of people. But I got into the automotive industry then, because that's where actually most of the jobs are, especially, up north, and which is where I'm from, northern United States. And then I got an account management job, and so it was a lot of engineering and kind of managing business type of stuff. I got to see a lot of that type of behind the scenes, like what goes into securing deals, bills of materials, like what it actually costs to build something, supply chains. And I just started this channel. Yeah, and I started this channel in the meantime, and it went well, and it became this outlet for me that I started to admittedly put more work into than my actual job. And eventually I just decided this was the one I wanted to do more. So there was no planned day where I was like, I'm sure this is what it's going to be, but that just ended up happening that way.
So you're doing this full time now?
Oh yeah, I've been doing this full time since July last year.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So
I agree.
Well, you got a lot of Patreon supporters and such, and it's with the assistance of the Patreon supporters, the donators, people that have been helping bring this content out, that really get all the credit for allowing us to do this and having a fun time while doing so. So,
Which, yes, speaking of patrons, I want to promote my podcast, Broken Silicon. My YouTube channel, Moore's Law is Dead. And we do put out exclusive ad-free versions of the podcast every week there. And Die Shrink's an exclusive patron podcast as well. There's lots of other stuff there, and I buy my dog bones when you sign up to support us as well. So remember, some of it's going to the dog.
yeah, that's
But enough
too.
about that. I had to show my channel at least once.
Well, I do have your channel as the backdrop right now, so we can show that here. And just so everyone's aware, AdoredTV.com, we do have Patreon as well. And I definitely wanted to thank Porsche Racer for donating $50 Canadian, it looks like. So thank you very much for that. That was awesome.
Thanks a lot, bro.
And I guess moving back to the topic with your channel, how did you settle on Moore's Law is Dead as a channel title?
I don't remember. I think that was always the name. It was technically Moore's Law Has Been Dead. And then after about 100 subscribers, they're like, maybe, make it a little less of a mouthful. But I mean, yeah, so the original name Moore's Law Has Been Dead just comes from, I wasn't quite sure what to call it. And I'm just, and I guess so, even though I wasn't sure what videos I would do at first, the first one was going to be like an overclocking guide for the MX150.
That's fun.
Well, everyone has that graphics card, right? So
Yeah.
And there's almost no guides on it, which we can talk about that as much as you want. But, and I was like, you know what? I'm just tired of seeing the term Moore's Law. It's dead. It's been dead for decades. It doesn't matter how you scale performance. It's just performance. Stop obsessing over die shrinking, and that's almost brought an Intel to ruin, I would argue, is this obsession that's no. We don't just want a 10% gain. We want to double it. And then it takes them 5 years. Like Moore's and to see people still argue about it blows my mind. It's not a law. It was an observation that died decades ago. We've been lying about what node we're on since the late 90s. This obsession,
you're
this
right.
almost religion
Right.
that it has to be alive is absurd. And so that's why it's called Moore's Law is Dead. And I will say this too, because I can guess it's going to pop up now. They'll say, well, Jim Keller was talking to Lex Friedman about it. It's like, dude, in Hot Chips 2019, I was in the behind the scenes Intel room having drinks, and I did get to talk to Jim Keller a little bit. And behind the scenes, he was saying, here's a direct quote, "I can't fucking believe anyone talks about Moore's Law anymore." So it's all just PR. It's PR that Intel believes they have to talk about Moore's Law. It's ridiculous. Tell me if I can't swear. I just did once, but we're 5 minutes in, so you won't be the time.
We flagged it as not meant for kids, but I don't think we marked it as 18 and over, so we got our one out of the way.
Yeah, I think we're good for
We're
one.
still PG-13.
Yeah, that's right. That's PG-13 now, isn't it? Now they can say that word too. Yeah.
Just once.
Just once.
Okay. I apologize. I never pretend I'm for kids, to be clear. But
Right. So I guess another excruciatingly painful question. What has been your best prediction and what has been your worst prediction? And I'm saying prediction to separate it from leaks, because that's another thing. Leaks are somebody else providing you information. What is something that you, based on your knowledge, your information, has predicted?
I'm glad you said that, because the notes I wrote down under that is it's hard to define what the best is and what a prediction is, because I think people will see like an opinion piece video and be like, because I did one, a perfect example was I did one saying, it wouldn't surprise me if RDNA 3 had like kind of similar to what the Radeon Pro SSGs have, or the direct connect to SSDs the next gen consoles have. Like they literally put like a 256 gigabyte SSD on RDNA 3 graphics cards. Like that wouldn't surprise me. I think if you wanted to eliminate load times and move data faster in a game, like let's just put a $50 SSD, on the graphics card and reduce latency. And RDNA 3 is not out yet, but it probably won't happen, But this wasn't a leak. This was me saying I think AMD will do this eventually. Yeah. So there's a huge difference between like leaks and predictions and all of that. But I mean, and it would go as far as to say I'm actually unsure what to call a prediction anymore, because like one thing I quadrupled down on was that there's no way in hell the PS5 costs more than $500. I will bet everything I own. No way. No, but it's because I know how much it costs to make it. Like, I did bombs for a living. So from my perspective, it was a fact. I really think the best prediction would be that Radeon would start getting market share and mind share back the second Ryzen does well. Like the second Zen, because and this is something Jim at Adored talked about too.
Yep.
That I almost wonder if people have forgotten about. It's like, it's all about the mind share. But just because it's about mindshare doesn't mean mindshare works the same way for every company. For Intel, it's their CPUs. Their SSDs sell better when they're in the lead in their CPUs. They really do. You can look it up.
Yeah.
And it's the same for AMD. If Ryzen's doing very well, even if it's not the best, if it's perceived to be the best, their graphics cards will sell well. And so that, I guess that you could say that's a stone cold prediction, though. You could say it's based on evidence, but.
Speaking of Intel SSDs, whenever we have a system in our environment that starts misbehaving or just flat out won't boot, I'm like, it has an Intel SSD, doesn't it? And sure enough, we go to pull the drive and Intel SSD is like one of their 520s or something like that. And we've moved away from using the Intel SSDs.
Really?
In our workstations. Mm-hmm. We've been aggressively, proactively replacing them with, in this case, Samsung, because they've been fairly reliable from a single user perspective. So take that as anecdotal evidence all you want, but 250 SSDs can't be wrong, right?
Those ones aren't wrong.
It's close enough to be, kind of a sample size. I mean, what do you need, like 1,000 of something to try to pull numbers?
Kind of depends.
Yeah.
Well, if you ask people on Reddit, they just need one.
Oh.
Yeah. Mine. That's all that
they
matters.
just need one, and their friend, I'm sure they totally have, who had the same problem.
Yeah, I've been having problems with... Go ahead.
It's interesting though that you brought up the consumer buying patterns and stuff, because I think that's something a lot of people in our industry really overlook, is how important. We have this idea that everyone is this really informed buyer, but some people just go to Micro Center and they buy stuff on the shelf, and they're just like, it's just an SSD, or it's just a case, or it's just an X, or it's a Y, and then they leave.
Mm-hmm.
And stuff like Mindshare is kind of ignored, and you have people who don't really add that into, I guess, their predictions or their understandings. I mean, the point you made about Radeon doing better when Ryzen does better, I don't know how many friends I've had tell me something like, Can you use an AMD graphics cards with an Intel CPU, or do you need to use an NVIDIA one? Or, I can't use an NVIDIA card with an AMD system. So this stuff is still there.
Oh, yeah.
For every really educated buyer, there's like 3 who ask these sorts of questions or buy things based on these assumptions. And there's just not a lot you're going to do about it because they don't want to put the time in.
Well, and one thing Jim pointed out, which is 100% true about all types of product lines, is people aren't looking for the best price performance most of the time. I'd say, if I had to guess, and this is just completely pulled out my butt, but like 20% of people are probably actually haggling, looking over all these review websites. Most people have a brand like NVIDIA, and they just find the card that costs how much they're willing to spend. And before I started this channel, in college, I was like a moderator on the Tom's Hardware forums when those were like crazy active, and I would help people with advice. I've all of those badges on there, whatever my account name was. And people would say, I have this budget, I want this graphics card, and you'd spend an hour working with them on what they really want. And it'd be like, well, I think you should get, for example, a 7850 1 gigabyte. And they'd say, no, I'm going to get a 650 Ti for $10 less. And
there's just nothing you could do with them.
And I'm like, you were always going to choose the NVIDIA card anyways, weren't you? And he said, well, I can't spend more than $150. And then my argument was, so $20 matters to you then? Well, then why don't you get a 7770? It's 10% weaker and you'll save $20. And he goes, no, but I want to spend this much. Like, well, either $20 matters or it doesn't, man. Either you can spend 20 extra, but that also means it'd be good to save 20 or not.
Mm-hmm.
And they were always just going to get whatever graphics card costs that much that has the brand they want. And I see people do it with AMD too, to be clear. I'm not going to pretend.
Oh yeah.
And Apple and whatever.
I've seen it with AIBs too. Like people will only buy, say an MSI, an EVGA, an ASUS, etc. graphics card, and it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
They will have to buy that brand.
Yeah,
because they have the loyalty
for the exact same clock speeds, and they'll just buy the EVGA instead of.
And they'll be like, "Well, it must be better because it's more expensive." That's how a lot of people make a lot of purchasing decisions. Well, it's more expensive, so it has to be better.
The thing I've noticed, and like I've been a graphics card reviewer for quite a while now, but the thing I've noticed when I'm recommending to somebody like a graphics card, they'll be like, "Well, isn't NVIDIA the best? Like they make the fastest GPU, like whether it's the 1080 Ti or the 2080 Ti at the time." It's like, yeah, but you're looking to buy something for like $150. Doesn't matter what the $1,200 GPU can do.
Yep.
It's like, but that's just the way they see it. That Halo product actually does affect what people will buy, even on the lower end, even if it has no bearing on the performance of that lower end product.
Well, and Mindshare changes, and the rules of Mindshare are really different for each company, and so that's why. I see a lot of people get stuck on like, oh, what worked before must be what's going to have to work in the future, right? So the reason AMD churned out the RX 480 is because it didn't matter if they had a Halo graphics card until they retook the CPU crown. It doesn't matter. No one sees, like, they lost market share when they took the graphics card crown with the 290X and the 7970. But before the 290X and the 7970, Phenom 2s were still pretty good, and they were just coming off of the mind share of good CPUs. So AMD made the calculated decision: we're putting all of our money into Ryzen, and we'll just churn out something for the mid-range, because it does not matter. It does not matter if we have a Halo product right now. They could have made one. I'm sure they could have. But it does not matter. And now it does matter. And now it does matter if they go for the crown, though, because that will gain them even more mind share now that they're perceived as a good brand again. But it wouldn't have before, but now they probably should do it.
And to be fair, I know a lot of people who built Ryzen systems with 5700s and 5700 XTs. So, I mean, they did sell a lot of those cards.
Yeah.
And now, speaking of Halo products, watching some of your videos and things like that, Tom, you're talking about AMD going dual chiplet basically with an IO die for their next gen RDNA 3, right? Where they have two ADCUs max.
Yeah. I haven't rushed out a leak going over everything yet, but as far as a few months ago, all info I had was that there's at least something going on with multiple chiplets, at least an IO die, and then graphics dies. And I know there's been some people sharing leaks about that recently. I'm pretty sure I put that leak out like half a year ago, but whatever.
Yeah, and I have seen some of those secondary articles, and some of them do cite you, so that's good. Something, since that's kind of the focus and everyone's looking at that, and the patent that was put out there, I think Fox on Twitter actually listed that one. What is something that you can think of that you would think would be something that's really awesome or neat in the tech industry that no one really seems to be focusing on right now? Like maybe something that companies aren't really focused on creating or making or pursuing, or just something that's out there that you know of that nobody's covering.
Oh, God. I saw this question. This was one of the ones I didn't put any notes for. So this is the one I didn't really prepare for. I feel like, how do I put this? Because I think that there could be a lot more focus on, like, if something was actually well designed overall. Like, I usually find good laptop reviews really interesting. They're rare, but I think at Hardware Unboxed and Notebook Check do some really good ones.
They're hard, to be honest with you.
There's so much you have to test.
There's so much work into it. It doesn't seem like a lot, and then you start doing it, and there is so much work in it.
Well, and it's because when you design a good laptop, you actually have to make a good device. You can't just make it fatter. You can't just make it use more energy. You have real constraints. And so if you manage, like I have an NV15 here, to make something this thin with a 10-hour battery life that has a full 2060 in it, and then they put the extra effort into having copper vapor chambers, so the i7 actually boosts past 4 gigahertz sustained. Then that's to be lauded. Like they actually found in some reviews that this 6-core i7 outperforms the 8-core i9 and the Dell counterpart.
Wow.
Because of how, at everything, including multi-core, because they just spent the extra $20 on good cooling, you know. So I think better coverage of like truly great laptops is something I think we lack.
No, that's a fair point. It's a fair point. There's a lot of guys whose bread and butter on YouTube is just doing laptop reviews, and they do decent ones, but you're not going to get enough of them.
Yeah. Well, actually, I should probably give some channel a shout. Is it Mobile Tech Review? What's her name? Yeah, Mobile Tech Review. She does excellent 8-minute laptop videos. Yeah.
Thanks. So, yeah, go ahead, Alex.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to change topics, so if you got
I had nothing else to say on this topic, so okay. I was just trying to think of something.
With laptops and efficiency and whatnot, that kind of circles us over to Alder Lake, where Intel seems to be doing a big push towards this like big little architecture. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on the efficiency side of things. Do you feel that those efficiency gains that they're going to get from this duopoly architecture kind of thing, this big little architecture, do you feel that those efficiency gains on the desktop are really necessary?
Well, so, at a certain point, I think power usage just is going to directly convert into performance. I mean, we've seen this with what's going on with Pascal and Maxwell. Maxwell was, which is really just a backport of Pascal. So I guess you would actually say Maxwell was originally designed for like 20 nanometer, then backported to 28. It wasn't, and they just invented Pascal. I don't believe Pascal was even on roadmaps for a while there. Or at least one of them wasn't. Don't get mad at me in the comments. Well, I know one of them wasn't on roadmaps at one point. It was meant for mobile graphics cards, but it just destroyed desktop performance because guess what? If it's efficient, you can clock it higher. And that's kind of what you're seeing with RDNA 2. That was designed for the next-gen consoles and laptops, and I'm finishing up a 6800 XT review. Well, it runs at 2.8 gigahertz. So, like, it's insane, it actually performs really well. And so when you go to Alder Lake, I think there's certainly an argument there was a lot of room for TDP room for a while there, but there isn't anymore. I mean, Rocket Lake's going to be an absurd power hog, so was Comet Lake. If you can reduce power usage, you can fit more there. And there's an interesting balance that I talked about in my recent Alder Lake leak from a week ago, where I confirmed the performance of the desktop chips, which is it should beat the 5900X, but probably not the 5950X in multi-core. And it's min-maxing performance per watt per millimeter squared. So the Gracemont Atom cores in Alder Lake should be about the IPC of Skylake. Now, this is where people in the comments jumped in and went, what? Does that mean we're going to get, smartphones with 9900K performance? No, they don't clock as high as Skylake. I never said they did, and they don't have hyper-threading. So they're not. They're really not. They're maybe, my guess is about a third as good as a Golden Cove core, which is a lot better than a Skylake core, to be clear. Yeah. But you know what, though? You can fit 4 Gracemont cores for every 1 Golden Cove core. So if it's a third as good, but you can fit 30% more core performance, I think there's an argument that you could, assuming they can do the scheduling correctly, have a better balance of multi-core performance and just forget efficiency. For the amount of millimeters squared on the die, you might maximize multi-core performance a little better than if you just put like 10 Golden Cove cores instead of 8. But now you're putting 8 and then 8 Gracemont. I think it could actually be very good for desktop as well. Although, of course, it was designed with laptop in mind.
Correct.
It'd be really interesting to see. Honestly, I'm kind
And
of
again,
looking forward
I'm
to it.
reporting what's going on. We have to wait for reviews to see if it actually works, because this will be a big deal if it works out.
Well,
People like me spending 40 to 50, probably more than that, probably closer to like 100 hours doing benchmarking.
Yeah.
well, and we got to keep in mind as well, these Gracemont cores aren't going to have hyperthreading, so there's no extra uplift from extra threads there. It will make the resources to each core definitely more available for the actual thread that's running in there rather than trying to share. And you made a point of the speed. A lot of people confuse the term IPC. They don't. They just flat out associate it with performance, and it's not. It's instructions per clock. You can have phenomenal IPC, but only run at 1 gigahertz and not be very performant. So that is a two-part there. You got to look at what they're going to run at and what the IPC is. So Skylake is actually pretty respectable considering these Gracemont cores, I'm assuming, are just evolutions of the Atom cores that Intel's been kicking down the road this whole time.
Yeah, it's not like you're going to have an extra 9900K, but it might be like you have clock 9700K.
Right.
Which, if they could accomplish that, would be a phenomenal accomplishment to just have for background tasks next to an 8-core Golden Cove. Which, again, Golden Cove could make Alder Lake an incredible gaming CPU. I really think it could.
Yeah, and the thing that's...
I'm not...
You're not what?
I was going to say, I'm not the kind of person who always... who's a huge fan of Intel, but I'm interested to see if we can actually have some tech that pushes stuff further along. Be really good to see.
Well, I think people sometimes think too, right, that I hate Intel, which is just not true. Down here I have an Intel shirt. Like, I have an Intel shirt, and I just bought a laptop half a year ago that has an Intel processor. It's like, well, why are you covering AMD so much? I'm sorry, guys. Zen's more interesting than Coffee Lake. Like, I mean, that's why I'm covering AMD.
What are you really going to talk about? Like, that's kind of the problem. I've sat there and I've said, so what am I going to cover on the Intel side? I mean, the only thing that I arguably have missed out on is probably talking about pricing and how you can, buy 10th gen CPUs and motherboards right now, where you kind of can't for the AMD stuff. It's better now, but for a good period of time, you just, what was it? The APUs were going for, $250. Like, I can't. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But
I think you'd say all of us want every product that comes out to be as good as it possibly can. Even if you were a fanboy, you should want that because it'll make your company more competitive.
Yep. That drives costs down and it helps the consumer. It should drive costs down. I mean, there's other things at play there, but that's the idea at least.
Well, they're definitely making Rocket Lake a little bit more performant by running it hot and heavy. That's for sure. But the thing,
I'm not a fan of Rocket Lake. I'm a fan of Alder Lake potentially, not of Rocket Lake.
Mark my words, though, when they release Rocket Lake, they're going to go and put marketing for Alder Lake, comparing the performance efficiency.
Oh,
of course they will. Why wouldn't they?
They're going to have some awesome numbers. It'd be like comparing Vega with RDNA. It's like
6 times more efficient. Just guys, look at this.
When you overclock it to the moon. Yeah. And so,
you ready for NVIDIA's like Lovelace or Hopper presentations comparing efficiency to Ampere? I mean, if Ampere somehow has 1.9 times more efficiency than Turing, which is just not true, Frank. It's just flat out untrue. It's maybe 20% better at best. Then I can't wait to see what they say Hopper has or whatever. They'll be like 3 times the efficiency by NVIDIA's standards.
Maybe
they're gonna have to create some type of new metric for measuring that.
Well, then again, Turing was,
or was
it?
Yeah,
they said Pascal was. Remember, they said Pascal was 10 times better than Maxwell, though. So I guess we should just stop speculating on how they'll advertise their new architectures. They always surprise me.
That is true. They do all come out of left field and give us some weird thing that we're just sitting here going, oh. So I guess the other thing is, since you mentioned new products and things like that, NVIDIA's CMP processor, their new HX series that they're coming out with for miners. I saw a few people mentioning Bitcoin in the chat earlier. I think this would be a good segue into that.
Oh, hell yeah. HODL, bro.
To the moon, bro.
Right.
To the moon.
You should put
Bitcoin by
sunglasses on while talking about it.
K at the end of the year.
I've had people asking me questions about mining. It's like, should they go and buy 10 graphics cards and start mining and whatnot? And quite honestly, I've been in and out of the mining stuff for quite a while, and I look back and go, if I had just taken the starter money that I bought video cards with, and just bought just BTC, just bought Bitcoin and hodled it, even to right now, I would have made hand over fist more money than I ever would have just mining straight through. And I wouldn't have had to worry about the logistics of heat, power, and all of that. Wouldn't have had to baby mining rigs or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about mining and crypto as long as you want. I mean, that's one thing that got me really into graphics cards too, is I've been mining since late 2013. Right? I mean, right now, there's a laptop right here mining, a Turing one, not Ampere. And then in the other room, there's 2 graphics cards and an old like 5-year-old rig that still hasn't kicked it with a Vega and some other graphics card in there. So I used to have many more. And that was one of the reasons I was like, I wasn't sure if I wanted to come on this week or next week or something. But I was like, with everyone talking about mining, I really think I can talk about the mining and these new graphics cards from NVIDIA as long as anyone wants. And the first place I'm going to start is that you got to separate 2 different things. You got to separate Bitcoin from the mining, because it's been its own thing since 2012, 2013, with ASICs and dedicated companies to making sure. And that's even separate from if Bitcoin's good, right? All I will say with the whole Bitcoin discussion is my first article I put on mooreslawsdead.com is about Bitcoin. It's like 8 pages long, and it goes over what I believe are the biggest misconceptions to new people who want to look at Bitcoin. So I'd recommend reading that. I'd recommend listening to the Stefan Livera Broken Silicon. He was a guest on my show, and he has a great Bitcoin podcast. And again, actually good. It's not like trying to get you to buy it, or he actually talks about like the economics behind it and projects going on. So I'd recommend those resources for anyone who wants to discuss Bitcoin itself. But when it comes to mining, an analogy I make is it's kind of like a gold rush. If you look at the first gold rush in California, I think people make fun of gold rush people now because of the last rush that happened in the late 1800s. We all think of these prospectors that lost everything buying shovels. Yeah, but that was the last one. The first gold rush built San Francisco. They were rich. You couldn't stumble through a creek without finding gold nuggets in the early 1800s. But that was the first gold rush, guys, right? And those people built companies. And then the second gold rush is kind of how I compared so if that was the 2013 mining boom, the San Francisco one, I would compare the 2017 one to the mid 1800s, where a lot of people made money. It was well established, so it was easier to get into as well. Like, you could show up there and there are already people selling shovels. Like mining cryptocurrency in 2013, there was a lot more like compiling and like messing with code you had to do. It was annoying, like straight up. 2017 was much more plug and play, and right now it's absurdly plug and play. Anyone can just take 5 minutes to figure it out. It's so easy now, but there's less risk and there's much more competition. I see people keep arguing with me in the comments that it's more profitable now than before. Guys, my Fury Nitro in early 2017 was making $400 a month. It was absurdly profitable in 2017. It's not as profitable now. And if you mind, go on.
I was just going to say that was $400 a month back then. If you had just kept those coins,
to say I didn't.
You'd have a few zeros onto the end of that.
Right. Especially if you sold it for Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's almost tripled in price and Ethereum's just barely gotten over its all-time high. So another thing to keep in mind, people, is which ones are here to stay and age better. Consolidate
into those for sure. That's the thing with coins. The the altcoins that are out there that people are mining, they come and go. They pop up and disappear. And it's such a meme they made a coin out of it.
Doge.
I never made any money mining Pascal coin, even though I thought their safe box initiative thing was cool, and no one knows what I'm talking about. I bet the price just goes up like 5% today just because someone talked about it. But I don't recommend you buy
Market
it.
manipulation.
It's going anywhere.
And I mean, I mined Litecoin, I mined Feathercoin back when it was directly mineable.
Feathercoin. Feathercoin was just the Litecoin of Litecoin.
Yeah, I went and raided that wallet. I didn't have a whole lot in there back then. It was just a dollar or something back then, but I cashed out for $20 or something.
But the big point I want to make about mining right now is that there is a huge difference between having your gaming card mine in the off hours, which if you have money, I would say the rule of thumb for me is if your cost of energy is below 0.08 cents per kilowatt hour, sure. Most people it isn't, by the way. But if it is, go for it. And if it's a bit above that, maybe you mine on the side, trade it for Bitcoin and keep it. It is a way to just have a passive conversion of dollars or euros into Bitcoin that you can then store in a wallet somewhere. It is a way to just do that without having to bother with Coinbase or something. But that's it. Building multiple rigs takes effort, and maybe it goes down once a week. But what happens if you have 8 rigs? That means one's going down a day. It turns into a full-time job. I know you say 5,000 watts of heat isn't that bad. Oh, yeah, it is. Your house is going to turn into an oven. Mine did in 2018. And so it's just, it's really only economical for a hobbyist who has 1 or 2 rigs or just a desktop, and then a mega firm who can afford to pay people to walk around and make sure they're working all day. Anyone in between, it's much more than just a side hustle. It turned into a full-time job in 2018. So maybe I saved a lot of money, for the future, but it was a lot of work. And then like, what if a power supply breaks, right? So everyone's mining right now, getting a new one. Are you really willing to wait like a month to get it back from refurbishment? Because that's a month you're not making money. So now you're going to go to Amazon and impulse buy a power supply to replace it, but it's double the price right now because there's a mining boom. So there's a lot of costs that you're forgetting about when you start mining.
So I bought. I used to build computers, like custom built for people, and sort of sell them that way. That was one of the ways I started. And at one point during the last mining boom, I bought like a bunch of power supplies one year for. I think EVGA had like a Black Friday sale or something. I spent like maybe $200 and I got like 20 power supplies or something. They shipped me this giant box full of power supplies. I bought like a couple like graphics cards and other stuff too, but it was mostly just power supplies in the box. I made so much money selling those to miners, like, because I just had them. Like, I'm telling you, like the power supplies that I bought on sale that were like normally $40, I was selling for like 60, 70 to dudes on Craigslist because they just needed power supplies and they didn't want to wait.
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of people hear me talk about this, right? And you just made the analogy, the people who made the most money in the gold rush were selling the shovels, not mining for gold. That's not true in the first gold rush. That's true in the last one. I think a lot of people hear me talk like this and they go, well, Tom doesn't think you're going to make money. No, guys, I had dozens of graphics cards, walls. I was a miner. I don't think mining is a waste of time. I actually don't. I do think that it's less profitable this year, though, and that there's a lot of costs you may not be factoring in. The energy in Peoria, Illinois, where I live, is 0.055 kilowatt hours. That's almost as cheap as some of the more expensive parts of China. Like, it's really cheap here, and it's also a pretty cold place, especially for central Illinois. So
I'm in Chicago.
There's a reason I did it here, Oh, okay. Yeah.
And if you look at some of these specifications that they have for the CMP cards,
right,
you look at like the 30HX, you can tune a 578 gig to get 26 mega hash fairly easily. Mine were running about 24 because I didn't go and do the extreme bootstrap modifications in the BIOS. I didn't do a lot of that stuff. But mine ran at about 95 to 105 watts, which was less than this rated power. So, and the other thing is these dies, the die shot that they have at the top doesn't really look like the ampere GPUs that we see, but they very well could just be salvaged 3000 series cards that maybe, like Donnie said before we started, the RT cores or something might have some defects. They might not be able to use some of the tensor cores.
Well, so, I think there's a lot of, for some reason, the whole thing about, as far as I can tell, the current stage of the discussion online about these NVIDIA Ampere mining cards has turned into whether or not they've locked down the BIOS enough. I think that's really missing the overall point, in my opinion. I think no matter how you put it, my opinion on NVIDIA selling these cards is this. These are Ampere graphics cards. Some of these could have been gaming graphics cards. Do I doubt that the default specs for these could be for some crazy bad bins? Yes, but I also think most of these are going to be what would have been gaming cards. Guys, these would have been gaming cards, and the fact is now they never will be. They never will be. If NVIDIA wanted to supply gamers out of the goodness of their hearts, which they're a company, why would they do that? Then the real solution to this availability issue right now is just to make more gaming graphics cards and hope gamers get them. And better yet, start producing more 12-nanometer cards and releasing them for a reasonable price, which they're not doing. They're still just going to sell the 2060s they're producing again for MSRP. They're still just going to sell 1050 Ti's for an inflated price. So there's nothing going on here, They would just rather you buy their old 12-nanometer cards, and they're going to sell what could have been gaming cards to miners directly. And now these will never flood eBay as gaming cards because they can't game. Now they're always only going to be for miners. So there's just less gaming cards because NVIDIA would rather sell these to miners. And you cannot tell me they're not going to charge more for this, by the way, than the gaming card, because this is the only card
they will.
This is their way of getting that inflated price without it just going inflated secondhand or through the channel, and they're not seeing any of that money.
Well, if
we actually, we got a super chat on the subject from Denvera1G1 said the HX30 is a 1070, the HX40 is a 1080 Ti. Changed my mind. Same performance, same wattage.
Right. They are bringing back some of these older cards.
1080 Ti does 8 gigabytes.
Does it have the? I didn't check the.
Yeah, the 1080 Ti actually runs about 36 mega hash on ETH. I have mine running right now at a 75% power. And it pulls about 34.
These are probably Ampere cards, but if they were using Turing or even all the way back to Pascal, I guess there's nothing that stops them from not using the same memory configuration. Like they don't have to use 11 gigabytes. But 8 just seems like a weird choice. Yeah, or 12 or whatever.
They 12, yeah.
I mean, they got 6, 8, 10 listed here as the memory size.
Yeah.
So they're most likely using a similar configuration with less RAM because they don't need to put that much RAM on these. But it wouldn't surprise me one bit if they were going all the way back to the 10 series because they are pulling the 1050 out of the dustbin. Why wouldn't they pull out some of the higher models of that?
That might explain one of them.
Yeah.
The top one's definitely just a 3080, though, guys.
Oh, most likely. What I think, though, is most interesting about their announcement isn't the dedicated mining hardware. That doesn't surprise me too much. But it's the fact that they've announced that they're locking future GeForce cards down from being able to mine, efficiently, I guess.
Which cuts gamers out of the profit, too. So now we lose as well because at least we could make some money back with these inflated prices.
Yeah. I was going to say for a lot of people, if you buy a 3070 or a 3080 now, at least you could mine on it to try to get some of the money back.
Right.
The big point Linus made in his recent video was that at least, down the road when the bottom finally falls out, people will be selling off their mining hardware secondhand, and you'll be able to buy it and use it as a gaming graphics card on the cheap, which doesn't exist when you have dedicated mining hardware that can't game and dedicated gaming hardware that can't mine. But I don't know. I'm a little bit on both sides of this because I hear all those arguments and I agree with them. But I also, in terms of locking GeForce cards away from mining so miners don't have a reason to buy them, if it works, like does that result in, gamers being able to actually buy graphics cards, in the near future rather than waiting, half a year or whatever for everything to settle down? And if that actually happens, if you're able to buy a 3060 and not have to fight with miners for it, then I think that's a net positive, but I'm not sure if that's actually going to happen.
Well, and I would agree with that statement if they didn't make a mining version of all of these cards, but they are, right?
Right.
And again, I guess I haven't heard the arguments of which dies are which, but there's no doubt the 90HX is just 3080s. So each one of those they sell people, and I'm looking at it on the other screen. That's why I'm pointing away from the camera. Each one of those 90HXs sold is a gaming card that will never that was potentially going to be a gaming card, and now what we know is it never will be. So there's now less supply to gamers no matter what, which the overall supply is the main problem, by the way. I mean, before this mining boom really went insane, gamers were desperate to buy cards for the winter anyway. So I really don't actually think it's miners that are most of the problem right now, unlike before.
Well, I think the miners exacerbated the problem, especially because a lot of people went and sold their 5600 XTs, 5700 XTs, and so on.
Or 2080 Ti's for $400.
Well, they could have sold them for $1,200. I would argue that was a good idea. Maybe not for $500.
No. My point is, these people sold these cards at the inflated prices because they saw what they were going for, and now they still need a graphics card. So they're also in line fighting with the people who have been trying to buy, a 30 series card since, say, let's say the people from September have finally gotten their cards. Let's say November and December.
Well, yeah. When the cards
so you expanded the queue. As soon as you get rid of the line grows again in the back because people selling their cards to miners. I don't know if there's a ton of miners going out and buying a ton of 3080s and 3070s. I know there's some.
Ideally, they would want a Radeon 7 still, by the way, because that can do over 100 mega hash and uses less energy than a 3080.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when these Ampere cards first launched, I bet you a lot of those miners were the ones that picked up those initial stock, leaving the gamers to fend for themselves with the scalpers and whatnot, because the miners are automatically buying these just like the scalpers. They're using bots, that kind of stuff. And
NVIDIA sold them to them directly, right? We saw those articles come out talking about how in September and October, I did that Ultimate Play article talking about NVIDIA lying about the release date. It turns out they were shipping stuff directly to miners first, and it makes sense. AMD hadn't launched their competition yet, so they don't need to get it to the gamers yet, right? They don't need to. They can just sell to miners first because that's the people who will pay extra first.
Yeah, and
that makes a lot of sense.
When they're trickling,
I actually hadn't heard that.
Well, they announced it during one of their quarterly reports that they had the line item for miners.
Oh yeah, about it. That's right. Yeah.
But all the cards that they're putting out now that are at MSRP still, those are being automatically snapped up. Most likely by miners because those are the ones that are the only ones that are really worth buying, because the rest of them, their ROI on them is so far out there that anything can happen in the 10 months it takes to mine to pay back a 3080 at $100 or $1,500 or more. So
I was this close to buying a 3070 the other day. So just the store crashed. It was on Zotek's site. The store kept crashing. Checkout.
And this lack of supply has been a tactic that has been used by companies for a long time. They don't ramp up production and things like that because it's risky for the company as well. You remember back in 2017, the companies were ramping up their production for that mining boom, and then the bottom fell out. Everyone wanted to get rid of their cards. They liquidated on the second market, and NVIDIA had this big write-down for all their overstock that they had. And
they said it was a Fortnite boom. Do you remember that? That was one of the funniest things I've seen in my life in an investor call. I talked about that in a recent video because I still can't stop talking about it. That's the funniest excuse I've heard in my life. As investors said, where are all these cards going? And they said, the popularity of PUBG and Fortnite is beyond comprehension. That's a direct quote. And it's like, yeah, it is beyond comprehension because it's not true.
Yeah, you don't need to buy a card that gives you 300 frames per second to play Fortnite, especially since a lot of the people playing Fortnite may not have had the greatest computer and may not have needed the greatest computer to play it. That was kind of the point with these massively accessible games.
Yeah, that's the entire point of Fortnite, is that you can run it on a toaster. I mean, why would you go out and buy the best graphics card you can for that.
Some kid playing it on his fridge.
It's not that nobody does that. It's just that the vast majority of the players aren't doing that.
Well, it's funny though. Someone in the YouTube chat just said this whole NVIDIA mining line and drivers is nothing but them trying to control the market and maximize profits. And it's like that's all it is, really. You know, AMD overproduced the 290X in 2014, and they lost so much money on overproducing those cards. NVIDIA did the same in 2017. They managed it way better than AMD did, to be fair, but they still had a write-off there. And that was a huge problem for Pascal, by the way, because that was right before Turing came out. So, like, you had all these cheap 1080 Ti's on eBay right when Turing was but what's going on right now is NVIDIA, like AMD during, 2017, said they would increase production by 20%, but they're not going to double it again because they don't want to risk that. And NVIDIA's trying to find a way to have it all. They're like, we're going to try to control who can flood eBay with these cards. We're going to try to control if gamers, we're going to try to control who gets these cards before gamers. And we're going to try to make sure there's no way to have a huge write-off. So it is what it is. This is a business, but that is what's going on, though. And it is annoying to see them pretend that this is for the good of gamers.
I would just like to be able to buy a card. I'm not even particular which one anymore. I just like to be able to buy a card.
Well, that goes to that lack of market thing. If something is rare and scarce, it drives demand for it. And Apple's been doing it. Everyone's done it. But the thing that you mentioned, Tom, is that you said this is a business. Yeah, they're not in a charity. They're not giving out graphics cards. But the thing that also needs to be in mind is gaming has been kind of a pastime, a recreation sport thing. But as soon as you introduce miners, now you're doing business to business sales. And with people wanting some of that pie just to have fun and play games rather than making money. Well, when you're doing things that make money, it sets the price for that item. The amount of profit that you're willing to lose in order to buy the thing that makes you that profit.
It's what, like 100 days worth of mining is what they usually, the cards market rate goes for, something like that.
I mean, ideally, that's what you'd want to try to target. Eventually, once things go crazy, people usually do the math for 6 months.
Yeah, and right now you're looking at
that's
10 months for some of these aftermarket stuff. And that's just too far in the future. I mean, you saw how fast it took for the last crash to happen. It ramped up to 19K in less than 3 months from 6,000. And then all of a sudden it was back at 3,000 within the next 4 months. And so,
but again, that is Bitcoin, though, and its pricing trajectory has really broken with Ethereum's. And Ethereum's going proof of stake. And I can't believe how few people are talking about that. Now, to be fair, will Ethereum's developers who centrally control this decentralized coin, will they actually get their proof of stake implemented when they say they will? I don't know. They haven't implemented anything when they say they will. So it could be another 2 years of mining, but that is a huge risk to people. Once it goes from, I'll make my money back in 3 months, that's not a risk. You'll make your money back. Once it becomes 6 months, it becomes risky. And once you're saying, it'll take a year, don't worry. I've seen people say, my laptop with an Ampere 3060 will pay for itself in a year. If Ethereum's still proof of work, I guess it might not be, though. And then you're going to have to switch to another coin, and you're going to have to download a new mining application if NiceHash doesn't support it. And then what happens if that coin goes belly up? Right now, Ripple's under investigation by the SEC. Right? That's not a mining coin, but all these projects can go anywhere.
I don't want to get into politics, but all it takes is a certain person within the FCC, the Trade Commission, SEC, sorry, to just start putting regulation down on these things. I mean, that's been something that people have been talking about for 7 years now.
Well,
I don't think it's going to happen to Bitcoin, really, because it's not controlled by anyone. But Ethereum, I am very surprised something hasn't happened yet. Yeah.
Well, and as those coins are brought into security exchanges and such, where you can actually put big dollars from 401k investments, these hedge funds, those kinds of things, as they get brought into those markets, they will start to get the SEC involved, and it'll have regulation, be it just exiting the market and converting to fiat. That could very well happen.
Yes.
But
I mean, there's nothing more I could say to that. Yeah, no,
right.
that's absolutely
So
true.
it's a big risk. You don't want to forecast things a year out, because who knows what it is in a year out. That's why these miners aren't buying these huge markup cards. That's just the people that think they're worth that, and they're not really. But
well, there's another thing I wanted to say too, and I almost forgot. It's your point. I think you said, Kirk, of these cards are really powerful, and they can be used for things besides mining. And that's something that I put out two big videos are big. They did well. Videos talking about mining and what's going on in the past week. And a big point I made in that one that I've made before is, like, we're talking about 30, 40 teraflop cards at this point. The fact that you think this will only be used for gaming is, guys, these are supercomputers that you're just putting in a thing with a bunch of RGB lights on it. Like, I've seen people all the way back to Vega Frontier. I remember people hooking up in devices that looked a lot like mining rigs, Vega Frontiers, because they were using it to render projects, like in movies and stuff. Right. Like, people forget that these are so useful for, like, folding at homes, data science, machine learning. There's so many things you can just slap a bunch of cards into and do calculations with that are, may I modestly propose, more useful to society than 4K instead of 1440p.
Yeah.
So they're always going to be there buying up cards for more than gaming. I know people don't want to hear that, but only the consoles typically strip out the non-gaming parts and try to make the cheapest high performance, it's all relative, gaming device they can. And those can't mine yet. Wait until someone hacks PS5s to be able to mine. It really wouldn't surprise me at this point, But, so that's something to think about as well, though, is that, hey, if it can do other things, I mean, they're really powerful, and if it's not mining, it would be something else a little bit.
Let's not kid ourselves. I mean, the reason why a lot of us have gaming computers in the first place is because we do other things with our systems. Like, a lot of us build computers up because, we wanted to edit videos, or we had hobbies. People worked in Blender. That's honestly been a reason as to why someone would build a computer, and it was one of the old PC master race arguments. It's like, well, what can you do on a console?
Yeah.
That was one of the big arguments that got people. Yeah, it's not just for gaming. So, I mean, the fact that businesses would take up on this once these things get so powerful, it's not that surprising. It's just, I think we just like better supply so that you could at least be able to buy something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's not a part-time job.
That's the big problem that you mentioned, though, is the supply. There's only so many wafers they can kick out, and it takes years to make a new factory that can make more wafers. And so it's very slow to react, especially to demands of that are more of a whim thing, like crypto.
By the way, speaking of pricing, I'm looking forward to see what the pricing is on DDR5 memory, and
it's
how people
expensive.
are going to forget. Are going to forget.
Yeah, right. It will be expensive. It'll mostly be businesses that'll buy it because they're the ones that can make money once again off of having it, and then that will ramp up the production, which will bring down the price.
Well, my Alder Lake leak talks about DDR5. Alder Lake supports both DDR5 and DDR4, but from what I'm told, motherboard manufacturers are deciding which one. It's not like AM2 Plus or AM3.
They did that
I think
before,
it was.
Though. The Intel boards did that before. I think it was one of them where you could have either DDR3 or
but it's not going to have that, is what I'm told. It's either DDR4 or DDR5. So you're going to have to buy the motherboard for the RAM you want. That's only the high end ones will have DDR5.
Yeah, that's what I meant actually.
Oh, okay.
Is like
the CPU supports it, but the motherboard is dependent on which one.
Yeah, certain, but it was like
unlike
DDR3L, the low power one.
Yeah. Well, they've been, I think they might still support that technically with Comet Lake because it's the same architecture as Skylake. I think I've seen laptops to this day that still have DDR3L with a Comet Lake CPU. I could be wrong. I know KB Lake ones and some Copy Lake ones did.
Update from the chat. Denvera wanted to correct his earlier super chat. Said, sorry, I meant to say the 30HX is a GTX 1060 6 gig, the 40HX is a 1070, and the 50HX is a 1080 Ti. All these cards almost exactly match the mining performance and power
No,
draw.
it's not. 30HX is not a 1060. That's very, very, very rare it would ever hit those clock speeds. I know. I had dozens of these cards, even with modified timings. No, it's not. That's a 2060. It could be a 2060.
I would agree. It's more likely a 2060. That's probably what they have the most production of right now.
Which anyway. I have right here, and I can tell you it gets similar performance.
Yeah. Was that a rumor, or was it actually confirmed that they're going to relaunch 2060s, or they're going to put 2060s back into production?
I wouldn't be surprised if the ones that they're launching in Q1 are both Turing cards, and it's the other ones that are going to be NPU.
Cat mustache for the win.
You know what? It wouldn't surprise me. Like I didn't had that suggested, but yeah, that wouldn't surprise me if that's just what is it? TU 106 cards right there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The cat. Yeah. I hope the internet's enjoying that.
Cat's like, well, yeah, I'd like to be respectful of Tom's time. And
I was going to say, I mean, I got maybe 10 more minutes if you want to talk about anything else.
Yeah. Do we have a question from chat? We can field one real quick.
Well, let me say one thing. I never answered. People may accuse me of being a politician if I don't go back to a question you asked. I didn't say what my worst prediction was. And I was like, was I that good at sidestepping that question?
I didn't notice.
That's right. You're all being hypnotized by Moore's Law instead. Join the Patreon. That was not me.
Yeah, I know.
I don't want to.
People
facetious.
Are gonna. Yeah. Sorry to bring that up. It's a raw wound right now.
Although I do want to say, I did hear that some people were testing some cards with co-processors. So there's something going on in NVIDIA where they're testing that. I always thought it was really unlikely they would get it into Ampere. They would get it into a mainstream architecture this quickly without us. Because like if I was NVIDIA and I was putting a co-processor in a graphics card, I would be like shouting about it at investor calls because that's huge. I wouldn't be hiding it to the last minute reveal. But anyways, though,
well, I mean, die can be kind of like a co-processor for AMD. They could put things like RT cores and specialized fixed function stuff into that, or even maybe FPGA stuff. Yeah, they can do that. That could benefit them.
And I'm a little surprised they haven't. But I mean, like one prediction that I had is I thought for sure the PS5 would load last gen games faster. Right. Oh. Like that did surprise me. I thought the Xbox would too, to be fair. Now the Xbox does for half of them. Right. But they still need a patch or something. I for sure, thought that the SSDs would do last gen games better than they did. They take over a minute to load, and it's like
it's very
next gen games. It's good. Don't worry. But last gen, I definitely got that prediction wrong. Along with a lot of other speculation about the PS5. And I think there's been a lot of people in the comments that misunderstand things that I've said about the PS5. I was always trying to explain why the PS5 is performing as well as it is relative to people's expectations. And part of that was an assumption that there was something besides the cache scrubber going on with its cache system. Based on recent die shots, that doesn't seem to be the case. But I don't think we're going to know for sure until months later when people fully annotate. But I do need to say that, though, because there's some people that are, I don't know, saying that I said it had RDNA 3 when I didn't. I said it had features that weren't in desktop RDNA 2. And that's not the same. That's a different thing than saying it has RDNA 3. I did put RDNA 3 in the thumbnail, though, to get clicks. I'll admit that.
Clickbait. And if it does have features that aren't in RDNA 2, I think you called it, it could almost be like an RDNA 3, but I don't think you went as far as to saying it definitely is RDNA 3.
Well, and there's a difference between speculating what I think's going on and telling you, making the title, it definitely has it. At least in my world, there's a big difference between those two, because I'm just trying to explain why it's performing so well, guys. So, at the end of the day, right, it's we know what its performance is, so these conversations are kind of a waste of time at this point anyways, but
it's all based on rumor and speculation.
Well, I think the other thing is people tend to think that if you don't sit down and explain every one of your for lack of a better word, your failures or the things that you misunderstood or did wrong, that you're ignoring that they're there. I think a lot of people, a lot of creators are very self-critical, and it's very hard to be good if you're not self-critical. So, I mean, you know, people like really dig on you and say, "Oh, well, you didn't say this and you didn't say that," and they'll oftentimes really misunderstand what you were saying in the first place too. People also take when you sort of make a prediction that it has to be law. A lot of times when we're doing stuff like this, I don't do a whole lot of it, but if you're doing stuff like this, you're making assumptions. I don't make videos on it. I make a lot of assumptions and stuff. But you're making assumptions and you're trying to make educated guesses. You're working with sources which, you know, sometimes could be very valid, sometimes could not.
Well, let me say that, like, the sources that I use in 2021 are far better than in 2020. And the ones in 2020 were far better than in 2019, except I think my Intel sources were always really good. That was something that I can say I've always done a good job with. But, you know, it's like, it is what it is. You learn over time which ones, not even just which ones are legit, but which legit ones actually know what they're talking about specific subjects.
Well, also, when you're like 8 months ahead on something, a company could change what they're doing in those 8 months, depending on how deep it is. You know, like there's like WCCF Tech always used to have these like really early shots of a card. And then they're like, well, it didn't come out to be that way, so everyone lied. And it's like, well, no, this could be one of the 6 prototypes that they came up with, and we just got the bad one, the one that they changed.
Yeah, well,
or in the time that they looked at it, they could have said, we don't like it.
Yeah, right, just because it was tested. Look, they were testing coprocessors. I never did a video on it, but just to say one thing, they were testing them. They were. I had the same people that got me my RDNA 2 info. They were testing them. They were testing coprocessors. They just never went into the final product. But I mean, the thing about assumptions is such a good point too, because earlier this week I did one talking about what can be done by AMD and NVIDIA if they wanted to make sure their graphics cards go to gamers, not miners. And people were like, well, you were wrong. They ended up locking down the 3060. And I'm like, well, I didn't say they couldn't do that. I said they probably wouldn't if they wanted to help gamers. What they're doing is to make more money, right? These cards are still just dies going to get, you know. And you know what I would say, by the way, let me say that too about those mining cards there, the 30HX and 40HX. Those could be sold to gamers too, guys. Like, I know they might be Turing cards, but they, like, do you know how good it would be? Like, I have a 2060, and for its performance, it actually plays Minecraft RTX better than I expected, by the way, with DLSS turned on. I'm going to admit it. If I'm going to be honest, a little better than my 6800 XT.
It's really like a shame, man.
But like, really, if they wanted to, they could launch the 2060 again for like $200 and the 2070 again for $300, and that would be awesome, right? You know, and believe me, they'd be making their money on that. So I do want to say that if they're selling last gen cards to miners, that still doesn't change the fact, like, AMD still produces Polaris, by the way, guys, too. So, like, they could be selling these to gamers at a reasonable price. And one more thing. I know they're saying I'm talking too much, but one more thing I want to say.
Well, you're our guest, so
exactly.
They can come here anytime to hear us.
But
if you want to hear me,
one more thing I want to say about the whole like console argument thing too is, I think one thing people misunderstand too when I argue with them about who's wrong is that I'm only going to address the argument you made. So, was I wrong to suspect, not double down, I only suspected that there could be some kind of, the die size of the PS5 was never going to have full infinity cache. There's no way. But I thought maybe it had a unified smaller one. You know, I was wrong about that. But if what you put in the comment is, you said it has RDNA 3, I'm going to say I didn't say that and move on. Right? It's not my, you know, and so I find it so weird people who attack leakers and tech tubers can't even make the honest argument. Like, there's definitely criticism for me to be had, but I never see it. It's always just something I didn't say in all caps. And it's just like, it isn't enough to point out when I was wrong about that small thing. It has to turn into a grand conspiracy.
Well, to
people in the comment section, we are paid off by everyone. So,
yeah.
Yeah, we all drive home in our AMD Lamborghinis.
And the weirdest
bikes.
Weirdest thing
I give
about
everybody the same rate, okay? I get the same check from everyone.
So the weirdest thing to me though is, it's the idea that like Jim would get this, that he's paid off, and I'm like, no offense to people who have advertising deals, and I'm sure a lot of them are above board, but why wouldn't the first thing to assume is that the people who are getting advertising deals from companies to be, the ones to suspect? And I'm not saying that those people are, all bad people, or you should immediately assume this, but why would you assume the guy that's making videos, without his face being shown, without fancy camera gear, and without an ad sponsor, that he's getting paid under the table? Where, I mean, if you're more likely to say these guys are doing stuff for clicks, I'd understand that a lot better. Like that.
Well, yeah, and they
more
accuse you
of
of that sometimes, for sure.
Right, clickbait's a thing.
But I mean, everybody's a little guilty to it. Everybody has those certain titles, those certain words that they put in the headers, the certain stuff they put in the thumbnail. It's what you do to get people to pay attention, but it's just the content is not supposed to be misleading. And that's really what you're supposed to do.
I'm not going to lie. I try to make my thumbnail and title the most interesting I can without being off subject. Like, that's literally my job, is to get clicks. But yeah, I at least try to never make it about something it's not actually about. There's always got to be some level of honesty. Well, level of honesty there.
I don't get mad when I see somebody say something in their title like 3 tricks to make your Ryzen processor way faster, or these games,
I wish they'd be a little more specific, though. I will say that.
AMD is now the gaming crown, takes the gaming crown, and then they don't.
AMD is now the gaming crown.
I'm sorry.
I like that more.
I'm gonna make bad English titles. That's what I'm gonna do.
You
All
already
right,
do
so I'd say, though, yeah, but is there any other product you guys wanted to talk about while I'm here? Because for like 5 minutes, I did want to make sure I admitted the things I'm wrong about without completely sidestepping it. But like, there any like Intel or AMD or anything?
So I'd like to know what your thoughts are on the 5000 series CPUs, for what their MSRPs are and stuff. Yeah, the Ryzen 5000 series parts.
Oh. Yeah, this is another thing they'll just say I'm an AMD fanboy for not freaking out, that they cost more. I mean, at the end of the day, they're priced in line with the competition. I think AMD is walking the line of charging more when they can, and going mad with power. I think, if I remember correctly, the second they took the performance crown in like the early 2000s, they're just like $1,000 for our top one, which was stupid. And it honestly, let's be clear, it was stupid. They could have taken much more market share and mind share if they wouldn't have done that. So they're not doing that. If AMD wanted to, they could charge $1,000 for the 5950X. They have it. They have the crown in everything. I don't even think Rocket Lake's going to take back the gaming crown. I think he'll trade blows at best. I think this is over. AMD's won. If they wanted to charge 1,000 and then 700 for the 12 core and 500 for the 8 core, guys, they're going to charge 500 for Rocket Lake. So if you're mad at AMD,
That's a fair point.
I mean, and that's really all I have to say. It's the 6 core is pretty much the best gaming processor for only 300. That's better than buying the 9900K for 500 the previous year. The 8 core is the best gaming processor, and they're only charging 450. What do you want me to say?
And the 5800X is the only one that is really available right now. I mean, I've seen that one pop up as available more.
It's on AMD.com. You can literally just buy it.
Yeah, no, it's in and out of stock all the time.
And it stays up on AMD.com for quite a while.
And it's as good as the 10900K that costs more. So, what are we even complaining about anymore? It costs less than Intel. It's stronger than Intel. You're asking AMD to be a charity if you ask them to do anything else.
I mean, my personal thoughts were, if I was still on 1st or 2nd gen and I didn't buy 3rd gen, I would have bought one of these.
Yeah, I would have. I would have just gotten this instead of Zen 2.
If I would have had, if I would have had Zen 2, and I already bought, an 8 or a 12 core, I would have sat on it.
And I'm sitting on my 3950X. I'm fine. It runs games at 120 hertz just fine. I don't need the new thing.
I mean, the one thing I'll say though that really, really impressed me is the 6 core. If you play, more like esports settings, like how people play stuff at low at 1080p, it beats the crap out of the 3600X. Like it's absurd in some of the benchmarks that I did. plug on something that I'm doing at some point. But yeah, no, I mean, I was unhappy with the pricing, but I understood where it was coming from. But I mean, what are you really going to do? That's kind of the problem.
I wish they would have just changed the names. I wish they would have said the 5600X. I do wish they would have been more aggressive. I wish they would have made what it would have like kind of gone in between what they did with Zen 2 and what they did now. I wish they would have made the 5800X actually the 5600X, but then charged $350. Right. That's what I believe the mastermind move would have been, is like, well, now the 600X is $350. So when we charge $350 for Zen 4, no one will care. But what we're going to do is make it 8 cores this time. And, you know, that's what I would have done, is I would have bumped the 12 core down to the 5800X, but I still would have charged 500 or something. Right. I would. And then when we have a 12 core Zen 4 for 500, no one notices we just made the 5800X $500 instead of $450. That's what I would have done.
No, that's interesting. That's a good marketing take.
But they didn't do that. They just literally increased the price $50. So it's like it is what it is. I don't know.
And took away the cooler.
I'm still a strong believer that one of the reasons that they increased the price was just because of supply.
Well, they can't keep them in stock. You know, they've sold over 1 million in Q4. Why they be? I'm sorry, guys. They would be stupid if they didn't charge more. Like,
no, and that's one of the things I said on the podcast when a lot of people were really mad over it. Jim was really mad at it, but I personally said, if you can't keep them, if you're having supply issues and you can't produce enough, why would you sell it at a lower price? Now you're just doing the consumer a favor. For no legitimate reason. You want to try to use cost to deal with the supply problem. I mean, it's not like they're not selling.
Yeah, that you literally have an obligation to shareholders to do that. And maybe I'll talk to Jim about that if he comes on Broken Silicon sometime soon.
Hint, hint.
We'd love to see him.
But I do need to go now. I think.
Well, we appreciate your time and taking your Saturday to join us, and I'm sure everyone enjoyed having you on. We definitely did. And be sure to check out not just Moore's Law's Dead's channel, but his Patreon. Check out our Patreon. Support us. We're there for you guys. We want to provide you with the best information possible and our thoughts on that in well-researched format rather than just quick videos. So it takes time and effort, and we spend a lot of time out there for you. So hope you
remember you can subscribe to Broken Silicon on any podcast app, Apple, iTunes, Stitcher,
Yep.
So
and
I'll shield that too.
Yep. I just got control of our anchor for this podcast, so we'll be getting that up quicker than usual. So we'll be putting this out on those podcast apps as well. So be sure to look for Overvolted and subscribe to our channels on YouTube. Hit that alarm button so you can get notifications. We're going to try making Overvolted more regular on Saturday around the same time, so watch your notifications for that. And with that, thank you, Tom, for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me on.